Hello, everyone. My name is Cindy Ptak. I am with the Economic Development Administration out of our Seattle Regional Office. And I just want to say I'm very happy to be here today. And I'm going to be speaking a little bit about what the EDA has to offer and how we may collaborate with tribes and tribal governments. Thank you so much for the invitation. Wish I could be here, and I can't wait till we can interact perhaps one-on-one. But for now, we're working in this virtual environment and trying to make the best of it. So I'm about to begin. Thank you. Before I do start, I did just want to speak a little bit about myself. I'm joining the EDA after a successful career at the Federal Highway Administration, where over the past decade, I directed several programs focused on transportation infrastructure development to build economic capacity in state, tribal, and local communities. For 7 years, I worked with our Office of Federal Lands Highway, where I directed the Tribal Transportation Program. And I've traveled extensively through Indian country. And that's part of the reason I kind of fell in love with the Southwest, and ultimately probably how I ended up here in Arizona. Before coming to the Federal Highway Administration, I spent 20 years with the Maryland Department of Planning, lived in Baltimore for that time, and built a career in state government as an urban planner, and ultimately left as the Communications and Legislative Affairs Director for the Maryland Department of Planning. I'm really happy to be here in Arizona to lead Arizona's economic development recovery efforts on behalf of the EDA. We're a really nimble agency. We're very small. We've risen to the occasion. We've ramped up quickly during this pandemic to meet the needs of economic recovery efforts, and specifically in Arizona, hopefully to meet the needs of Indian tribes, but also across the country. So before I begin my presentation, what I wanted to do is show you a little bit about what the EDA looks like across the country. As I mentioned, while I'm stationed here in Arizona, in my home, for now, I do work out of the Seattle Regional Office. Prior to the pandemic, we all worked from Seattle, and also our economic development representatives tended to represent more than one state. So our coverage area, even a year ago, was very different than what it is today. So as a result of the influx of federal dollars into our own agency in an attempt to address the pandemic as it unfolded before our eyes in real time, the EDA really ramped up and hired one person per state to address the unique needs that each state is facing. And so that said, we are all working remotely. We are not working out of the office right now. And it's hard to say when we'll be back there or if we'll be back there. But for now, the EDA does not intend to open offices per se in every state, and I will continue to work remotely in that regard. I'm very happy to be here. Hopefully, I'm very much here to make an impact. Arizona in particular, we know Native populations have been hit very hard. There's a large Native population in Arizona. And again, just hopefully trying to make an impact wherever I can. And so I'm happy to be here to share with you that information. So a little bit about what the Economic Development Administration does. As I mentioned, we're a very small, very nimble agency. We've only been around for a little bit over 50 years. But we try to make a big impact, and we're helping to make it easier for businesses to start and grow in the United States. We do this by working hand in hand with local economic development partners to advance locally developed projects, projects that are tied into a region's sustainable economic development strategy. And that's really what I hope to focus on a little bit more later in my presentation, is the emphasis on collaboration and strategic planning so that we can best leverage our resources. We do provide grants, investments to tribes, units of state and local governments, and nonprofits in communities and regions suffering from economic distress. We like to target our investments to attract private capital and to create higher skilled, higher wage job targets with the outcome of being sustainable quality of life and again, high paying jobs, career ladder jobs, such that the quality of life reverberates throughout the community. And we tend to focus on locally created projects to help an area bolster its economic competitiveness. So I think I'd be remiss to not acknowledge this conversation in context of the pandemic itself. Again, as I mentioned, EDA has been around for 50 years or more. And in a lot of ways, we were always here to focus on economic disaster and recovery. That said, in the 50 years that we've been around, never have we faced anything of this scale and magnitude. So we do have what we call economically distressed areas, and we have definitions for that. But since the pandemic, the entire United States is technically defined as an economically distressed area. So here we are to recover and become even more resilient, and we continue to move through this global pandemic. I just want to share with you, because this is the state in which I represent, here's what Arizona looked like last year. Very different than it has in years past. And we've tried very hard to normalize an event that is anything but. And I feel everyone has their own version of that. Tribes in particular have their own version of that. Economic distress looks very different in Indian country than it does anywhere else in the United States. So what you see in the background, the dark line, is what it looked like in Arizona comparatively to the United States. Again, we've tried to normalize this. We've been adapting, we've been pivoting, and for the most part, we've just spent a lot of time just trying to survive. And so here's what it looked like in Arizona. That graph translated into significant job loss, a significant quality of life that it changed dramatically. Job losses in every sector, with the exception of trade, transportation, and utilities. That was the only sector in which we saw job gains. Again, everyone has their version of that. And we know Indian country has suffered disproportionately. And this pandemic has really only amplified centuries of economic distress. Over the past year, in my work with the state, it's become increasingly clear that a successful recovery in economic growth depends on two things: broadband connectivity, particularly in rural Arizona and indigenous Arizona, and bringing back the tourism industry, which is by far the largest industry in the state. And as you can see up on the screen, it's the one that's taken the largest hit. And by definition, both of these two things are extremely large-scale endeavors that include multiple partners and will require a lot of collaboration and strategic planning. The information here is that I'm presenting here today is data-driven, yet at the end of the day, I feel it's consistent with, maybe at our core and in our hearts, we all know to be true. We understand what's happened to us. We understand where we've taken the hardest hit. So while these details may differ across the nation, my reason in being here today really is to suggest that we all have an opportunity moving forward to define what success could look like. Normal no longer exists, and really that there's no need necessarily to go back to the way things were. And for many of us, you know, the way things were wasn't necessarily optimal anyway. And if we can take a look and what we understand to be the tragedy of the past year, to continue to move forward is to really to see where are those opportunities and try to make our way and forge success, sustainable success moving forward. So what I really want to say in this moment that we're in is that the future and economic recovery is really the one that we create. And in here, for me, representing the Economic Development Administration, what I'd like to do is shape the dialogue and discussion and revolve that around recovery and resilience, and to pose that in context of evolution, not a return back to the way things were, not to figure out normal or even to suggest to go back to normal, but really let's talk about what's next, what the next thing could be, and then together and with our partners and our stakeholders, let's create it. And so what I'd like to talk to you again about today is how the EDA can collaborate with tribes, with tribal landowners and landowners in such a way that our efforts become the antidote to economic distress as we move through this global pandemic. And just to suggest that we can innovate. We encourage new ideas and creative approaches to advance economic prosperity in distressed communities. And if this isn't the time, I mean, I really don't know what is. So let's make it the time. Let's do that now. So I want to drill down a little bit into our mission and how we execute that mission and where we see the focus of our investments. We basically, we provide funds. We really, and through the competitive grant process. And so we have eligible EDA applicants can be a district organization. We focus our efforts through locally designated economic development districts in the state of Arizona. We have the National Northern Arizona Council of Governments. We have Southeast Valley. There are many economic development districts all across the nation. And in these district areas, they do include Indian tribes. But I would also like to say that in some cases, the differences in economic issues between these economic development districts and tribal issues are very different. And while they may be part of these economic development districts, we do recognize that Indian tribes create their own plans and their own strategies, sometimes separate and apart from those economic development district comprehensive economic development strategies, and we recognize those. So that said, an eligible applicant can also be an Indian tribe or a consortium of Indian tribes, could do that in conjunction with another state, county, or city, or a political subdivision of a state. Also, we work with institutions of higher education, which could include tribal colleges, community colleges. We work a lot with Arizona State University, of course. And we also work with public or private nonprofit organizations or associations acting in cooperation with officials of political subdivisions of a state. What does that mean? Many times a local government or a tribal government, while you can identify a way moving forward, a government itself is not necessarily in the best position to actually deliver projects. And in trying to determine who that may be, could be easily a nonprofit arm or an extension of that government that is in the best position to move a project forward. And in that case, the nonprofit could be the applicant. We don't provide funding investments to for-profit entities, and we don't pass funds through for-profit companies or individuals. Particularly in an era of COVID, sometimes there's a lot of confusion between those two things, the PPP program that's run through the Department of the Treasury and our program run through the EDA, which really, again, is for government entities or nonprofits. We do have a series of investment priorities that I will go through in subsequent slides. We do have federal cost share requirements or matching requirements, and then we would weigh an application against performance measures. In most cases, EDA investments do require a cost share, but again, Indian tribes are eligible for 100% of the federal share, meaning there is really no matching requirement. Those important performance metrics that EDA looks at would be the degree to which these projects will create jobs and private investments in a region, within tribal boundaries or externally, or a little bit of both, as well as other performance metrics for the specific project. So while we do large infrastructure development projects, the way I really like to compare that is, EDA is not necessarily in the business of infrastructure development, but we will do that. We will invest in infrastructure because at the end of the day, we know that those infrastructure investments are very important to attract businesses, and that those businesses create jobs, and that those jobs are career ladders or pathways to higher paying and sustainable jobs and sustainable qualities of life for not just the individual, but many times for family members as well. And that investment reverberates throughout the community and grows over time. So in taking a look at EDA's program portfolio, of particular interest, I would like to again, pull out our planning program, our public works program, our economic adjustment and assistance program, which is our economic recovery program and disaster recovery program, technical assistance, research and evaluation, trade adjustment and assistance for firms, and build to scale. I don't really want to go through this at length. We're going to have an extensive question and answer period after this presentation, but also in the links below, there's a lot of detailed information on these programs and also links to our funding opportunities so that you can get a really good sense of what these programs are about and what an application would look like and the kinds of information that we would need to make a determination for eligibility and also for funding for your project. And that said, as an EDR, as an economic development representative, I have counterparts in 50 states and territories of the United States and can easily link you, if you're not in Arizona, I can easily link you to my colleagues in either any of those states so that you can really have those one-on-one conversations with them. And I would really encourage you to do so. I think it's one thing to kind of look at an application and look at the questions on the application. And I think that, sometimes there's a real tendency to see a kind of a right to fit, and here's what the EDA would like to see, and here's an opportunity for us to bring funds back. But I would like to challenge you to kind of look at it in context of a project that you really need and you really want to develop, and then use us as advisors and as collaborators to see how we could really put something together so that your needs are met and that we could help you establish the link to our investment priorities. I feel that's a much easier conversation to be had. When you look at the questions on the application, there's just any number of ways that those could be answered. But the real way to approach that is to make sure that what you're communicating to us is what you really need and what outcomes you're looking for. And then we really can help you connect the dots in terms of our investment priorities. We are a very flexible funding program. We can support plans, we support feasibility studies, other capacity building projects, as well as construction projects. I'm really here to emphasize the planning nature of the work that we do. Many times when we get a phone call, people already do have a project in mind and they're really looking for design, engineering, straight into construction. But all of our projects at their core need to be referenced to some type of strategic planning document. If it's a business investment, for example, a lot of times what we'll really look at is the feasibility of that enterprise, a business plan. How do you know it's going to work where you are? Do you have the workforce such that these businesses find employees? Those are the kinds of questions that we really can work with you on to help you develop. And in absence of those kinds of plans, we would help you craft a way forward and fund a strategic planning document, and also to make sure that all of the parties are at the table at that time so that we can kind of minimize the risk of unforeseen circumstances, and also minimize the risk of the federal investment and also yours too. And so that there are no setbacks moving forward as you move through the project. I want to talk a little bit about the CARES Act, which many people may be familiar with at this point in time, which stands for the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. It is a supplemental appropriations. EDA is funded every year. Before the pandemic, we had a significant budget for public works development. This was a $1.5 billion supplemental appropriation to assist communities specifically impacted by the coronavirus pandemic. The majority of EDA CARES Act funds are available through an addendum to our Public Works and Economic Adjustment Assistance Notice of Funding Opportunity, commonly referred to as an OFO. And a lot of this information is available on our website. If you click on the NOFO itself, where the EDA is concerned, you'll see 4 different packages, and they're broken down into planning, design and engineering, construction, or non-construction. And so before you hit apply, what is a really great idea for you to do is just to simply view it. You can download the package. You can download the applications themselves. You can see what an application itself entails because there's a lot of information that goes with putting together an application. And then I would suggest that your next step really would be to give your state's economic development representative a call and say, hey, I've taken a look at this application package. We've been thinking about putting forth a project. now that I see all the information that's required, maybe it's a good opportunity that we do step back. We kind of look at taking a look at it from a broader perspective. Maybe we decide we do want to go through the planning process, or maybe we do need to determine the feasibility of what we're trying to accomplish. And we think we could use your help. We think that this is a good opportunity for EDA funding, and we would love to have that conversation with you. Again, we do tend to focus on areas of economic distress, and what you see here up on the screen is what those definitions are of economic distress. And if you look at the NOFO or the Notice of Funding Opportunity that I just mentioned, all of these definitions are in there, and as long as you meet that criteria, that's kind of your door into the funding opportunity. Indian reservations and the surrounding areas are also a definition. We recognize the chronic economic distress of Indian reservations and ancestral territories, and that is definitely part of our criteria. That said, if you're working in the vicinity of an Indian reservation and with communities in the surrounding areas, so say, for example, in the Southwest, a lot of indigenous communities outside of the reservation boundaries also tend to meet these definitions of economic distress. And you'll again see them here up on the screen. And we look at things like chronic, not just unemployment, but underemployment, such that the median annual salaries are less than the national averages. And then of course there are those special needs that directly relate to disasters, natural or other major disasters or emergencies, non-COVID related, but obviously COVID as well. In Arizona, for example, we see a lot of northern Arizona has suffered from coal plant closures, which you kind of have the economic engine, just you kind of pull the plug on that, and the recovery effort has taken place over the last several years. I mean, it's tough to recover when a large industry just one day just announces it's going to close, and life as you know it changes dramatically from there moving forward. We also look at areas that have experienced significant population loss, or again, underemployment. A lot of times that population loss is directly related to a major company closing. And then we also look at projects located in qualified opportunity zones. There are many Indian reservations there that are themselves qualified opportunity zones themselves. And again, we do invest in critical infrastructure needed by businesses to locate or expand in the United States in an effort to generate thousands of middle-class jobs in areas of the country that need them the most. Some examples, and this is by no means an exhaustive list of infrastructure projects that we fund, would be roads and bridges, water and sewer systems, broadband, and industrial parks, manufacturing centers, skills training facilities, business incubators, and anything in which private businesses are encouraged to come in and invest in your area and bring in jobs. Again, applicants must demonstrate chronic economic distress in order to be eligible for that grant assistance. And the other thing, by definition, these projects are large scale, they're expensive, and they include multiple stakeholders and property owners. They are just very large and expensive most of the time. I want to be very honest with that. They'll cost way more than EDA alone can fund. We're looking at projects in the multi-millions of dollars, and frankly, our average investment or our average award is about $3 million, between 1 and 3. A planning grant is much less than that, but construction projects, we really can't do more than about $3.5 million. Again, there are awards that are higher than that, and there are some that are far lower, but that's kind of our sweet spot. And we've looked at project proposals that are in the tens of $1 million. So what do you do in a situation like that? The project itself is relevant, the costs are reasonable, but again, by definition, you're almost going to have to start reaching out to other partners. This is one of the reasons I love working for EDA, because we recognize that. So a critical part of our team is our Office of Economic Development Integration. So our Economic Office of Integration is really located in headquarters. But we have an economic development integrator in each one of our 6 regions. And so I really do want to focus a little bit on that today, because I do feel that moving forward, success really looks like, and you know, again, with an emphasis on strategic planning and collaboration, it's really important to get everybody at the table. And everybody, when it comes to the federal government, is probably a series of federal agencies, not just one. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the objectives of our office, and that is to increase access, enhance the collaborative process, and by getting everyone to the table at the right time, by definition, you will reduce your administrative burdens. I mean, the same project officer, the same project person that you're going to be working with, you know, rather than making dozens of phone calls and where you may or may not get the right person, and you really have to spend the time getting to know everyone's individual missions and objectives, you get to have that discussion right at the table at the same time. And this is so that we can ensure that communities can easily identify, engage federal economic development resources that can best support your local priorities and objectives, at the same time recognizing that while there may be several agencies that may fund your infrastructure project, we all come at it for different reasons. As I mentioned, the EDA comes at it from the perspective of job creation. The Department of Labor may come at it from a different perspective. The USDA may have a different mission, but at the same time, it's really about finding where is the intersectionality of those things so that we really can come together and you can put together a project that is interesting to everyone. And that said, while we represent the federal government, we may help you also identify other partners, non-federal partners that may also be interested in investing in your project as well. And each and every one of those, you know, the opportunity to leverage those resources just becomes exponentially greater when you can do that. By pooling your resources and facilitating those complementary investments across programs, you really have the opportunity to better advance your priorities and perhaps create a synergy that's greater than the sum of its parts and get something even better than maybe you had hoped for. But the key there is to be strategic, to be inclusive, and to get everyone at the table. And that's not necessarily always the people that will agree with you, that don't necessarily see the project the same way that you do. But to get them to the table now so that those things can be worked out with the understanding that at the end of the day, everyone's not going to necessarily agree with your path forward, but they will have a clear understanding as to what your view of the world is and why you're going to move forward, and to also find perhaps an integrative solution so that everybody's needs can be met in the best way forward. And again, by working, reducing those administrative burdens, you really do have more time to focus on the things that interest you most. And that's achieving comprehensive solutions for long-term economic prosperity. And really our overall goal is to optimize those investments and really build resilient economies. And, you know, we've always had that mission, but I think we really know what that means more than we ever have, and the importance of really building an economy that really can stand the test of time. And we're looking to increase the return on investment of our economic development resources. And the way we would really look to do that, working with you, is through those active partnerships. And again, EDI is here to help you facilitate that, and so that we can generate and sustain community-based economic growth. And while our economic development integrator couldn't be with me here today to conduct this part of the presentation, she will be available during the live Q&A session. So I really look forward to those conversations that we'll have following this part of the presentation. So here are some of our EDI resources. And again, I don't want to go into that at length during this part of the presentation. We can talk about that more in our live Q&A. But again, we have these links on our website. And what we really do is we can foster this interagency collaboration investment by focusing on communities and regions that have either completed strategic plans or would like to complete strategic plans, have identified priority objectives, but perhaps you also lack the resources for implementation, and that's where we can help you there. Federal disaster recovery also includes coordination with our National Economic and Recovery Support Function. And that's when we have areas that have been declared disasters. For example, in 2017 and 18, areas of Florida, Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands were declared disaster areas. We also do have an interagency strategic planning guidance, and that's our Economic Development Administration Community Comprehensive Economic Development Plan, and also Housing and Urban Development's consolidated plans. So that offers you practical step-by-step guidance and streamlined planning such that you can incorporate both of our strategies and that you can plan on that right from the beginning. So what are the benefits of streamlined, comprehensive, and strategic planning? I'm hoping you're starting to see what that is already. Economic stagnation and other forms of community distress really don't happen. They're not the result of one single cause or circumstance, but really they're the result of multiple things, interrelated contributing factors, some of which are longstanding, some of them are processes, and in Indian country we know that's happened over centuries. And then sometimes they're complicated by events, and we see that with COVID, in which these events just simply amplify long-standing distress over time. And again, in Indian country, we have the complexity of land ownership that by definition warrants a collaborative process, such that all views and concerns are represented during the planning stages, especially for large-scale projects. And then, to elaborate on that, there's really just no one single solution. And because there's no one single solution, there's really no one program. And it's not necessarily all private, and it's not going to be all public investment that's going to be designed to effectively address each and every source of economic distress. And so there, again, I would have to emphasize that the solution really lies in working effectively together with all parties co-investing in the outcome. I mean, we can become co-creators. Federal agencies can be one of those partners, and I really mean that. We want to be your partner in this. We want to be part of a collaborative process to maximize beneficial outcomes that would really not be possible if these same resources were invested separately. And again, this is one of the reasons I love being with the EDA, because it's really not just about you filling out the application in a vacuum, clicking on that submit button and then waiting to find your answer. But well before you submit that application, we can work together, either individually as our own agency or collaboratively with all of these other partners, and we can help you define who those partners may be. And so what I want to show you is just some sample investments that we funded in prior years. And I'm using the Seneca Nation of Indians as an example and how they really did use our economic development integration team to help build a project that really gave some really positive outcomes. In this particular case, the EDA awarded the Seneca Nation of Indians almost $300,000 to develop a broadband fiber deployment strategy, feasibility study, and engineering plans. So there again, you have it, to just come into to develop an application to construct broadband. Right off the bat, we're going to ask you to kind of step back and ask if you have this broadband plan, which is a requirement. And then almost by definition, because it's so complex, the feasibility of doing that very same thing. How do you really construct a very large scale project? And so the feasibility study was very important. As a result, the outcomes of this project was a data center ready, student and professional computer centers, enhanced online education opportunities. The outputs and opportunities, the Seneca Nation of Indians working with the Bureau of Indian Affairs, Indian Energy and Economic Development Programming, Seneca Nation, Salamanca Rail Museum, enhancing rail to trail models. You can see all of the partnerships that were really forged as a result of this one project, this one broadband project. And so along with EDA, we brought in USDA's Reconnect program, who some of you may be familiar with, to deploy the fiber to premise broadband network. Again, it just takes, there are just a lot of moving parts in a project like this. And a lot of times the person that has identified the opportunity with the EDA comes into it because they understand this one piece of it and they have the capacity to perhaps deliver this one piece. but they soon become overwhelmed at the magnitude of what that really means to do that. And again, we can talk through that and bring the appropriate partners together. And again, we have on our website some of these case studies too, if you want to explore them in more detail. Some other examples too are in 2020, the Yurok tribe. We funded for a broadband feasibility and deployment study. In 2019, we funded a disaster supplemental award to the Lumber River Council of Governments in North Carolina. $1.5 million award to fund the construction and installation of approximately 83 miles of high-speed dark fiber optic cable in Chemung, Schuyler, Steuben, Tioga, Tompkins, and Yake counties in New York. And in 2018, we funded almost $500,000 in public works funds to Interbell Telephone Cooperative in Eureka, Montana. We do have a lot of this information on our website and more. You can see when you go to our website, you can click on annual reports and you can see all of the projects that we funded over time. So that said, we're going to be moving into our live Q&A session. What I wanted to do is put for you up on the screen my contact information as the Economic Development Representative of the state of Arizona. Happy to connect you with your state economic development representative should you be interested in EDA funding. Frances Sakaguchi is my colleague in the Seattle Regional Office. She is our economic development integrator, and she will be joining us in the live Q&A. But also what I would like to put for you on the screen too is other means of contact should you want to follow up on any of the information that I presented as well today, whether that's our EDA, other EDA programs, our other funding opportunities. Again, some of our success stories that I haven't really covered here today, our disaster recovery efforts, our innovation and entrepreneurship site, as well as more information on our economic development integration team. So thank you for being here today. Thank you for spending the time here with me today. And I look forward to hearing more from you in our Q&A. And at some point, I really look forward to meeting all of you in person and to doing the networking that we know we'd love to be able to do right now at this point in time. Thank you for your time.